Well, it is true that since 1999, we have not witnessed a fundamental shift of the central role corruption has played in our political process. I will even stretch it back to the Fourth Republic, and there's an interesting book, Class, Ethnicity, and Democracy in Nigeria, The Fall of the Fourth Republic, which was written by Larry Diamond. And the second edition, incidentally, was reissued in January this year. And he tried to paint a picture of why that is the case, which is the link between corruption and our political process. And he tried to explain it's not as if we have a different species of individuals in this country running our politics when compared to the rest of the world. But the central factor is that unlike what happens in other parts of the world, where the whole process of class formation, capital accumulation is done through the productive process, people actually investing, and that here, the whole process of enriching people oneself is capturing the state through elections by political parties, but in the hope that once that state is captured through the whole primitive accumulation process will continue. And you can look at the seminal figures in our businesses. How did they make their money? It's through affiliation with the state. And we have not broken, that process, although we are beginning to see the semblance of that, which is why in the emotion around how bad things are, people are actually beginning to lose sight of what progress we have made. I remember, as an electoral observer, in 2003 election, the Nigerian Stock Exchange supervised corporate contribution to Obasanjo's re-election. Under Ndio Okereke, I think Dangote was perhaps the president there. Everybody in the corporate sector contributed to that election. But look at what is happening in the build-up to this election. We are now seeing businesses and business leaders contributing openly to the two parties without fear of being harmed in one way or the other, which wouldn't have happened. I mean, if the allegation of PDP is anything to go by, that the jet General Buhari is using to campaign was donated by Oando. And we also saw a set of our business leaders contributing 20-something billion to the re-election of president. So you have seen that actually we're beginning to see perhaps an emergence of a business class that is beginning to delink itself from just the ruling party. And the hope is that if that progresses, they will get to a point where the regulations, because when you are talking, you talked about we have institutions, we have the laws. It's just the sheer force of personal example to drive the anti-corruption fight that is lacking. So it's not a recent thing. They said, under the present situation that we're witnessing democratization of corruption. But if you remember during Babangida's election, he was accused of corrupting democracy and democratizing corruption. So it has been with us for a while. Actually, I would say since First Republic. But we are beginning to see which is why my interest in this, as much as I agree that if you use the classical definition of free and fair election, we may not say what we are having, what we are going to have will achieve that, because it takes into consideration what happens before, during, and after the election. But I think we have an ample opportunity between now and March 28, when the first elections will start, to achieve credible election. And the concept of credible election is actually what is now being used. Because of inherent defects in the system, you can't use free and fair election. But you have an opportunity to achieve a credible election, which is on the balance of probability. Would you say the outcome of this election reflected the opinion of the people freely expressed?
Well, Mr. Chukwuma, in light of what you have seen and what we have been told by INEC and the arrival of our permanent voters' cards and card readers and all, we have heard about all that, are you still skeptical about us not having free and fair elections?
Well, again, we have to interrogate this concept of free and fair elections. It begins with the formation of political parties, registration,
it's campaign. A long road.
Is it violence? Is it free? What happens on election day and after the election? It's a whole process, which if you go that route, we have actually lost some mileage. But I'm saying as to the credibility, because when the chips are down, it's asking somebody who voted or a group of people who voted, would you say the outcome of this election, largely reflected the vote cast? We have an opportunity to achieve that. And the card readers, the PVCs, and also the fact that we have national parties rooted across the country going into this election. I get, phone call, text every weekend from my village far away in Mbise, from both APC supporters and PDP supporters inviting me to meetings, contributing to this, even though I don't belong to any of them. But in previous election, some of the candidates, including General Buhari, did not campaign in some states. But we now have parties that are rooted in all the states, in all the local government. The campaign is not just whistleblowing for. People are going from state capitals to local government areas. We have an opportunity right now to actually produce leaders. We can say that there's a correlation between voting patterns and the outcome of the election.
Yes, it's as you said, there's an opportunity here for the country to move forward from where it used to be. But the actions being taken are considered tainted politically. I mean, you talked about the card readers, the PVCs are going to help to clear the mindset of a lot of people. Okay, the process was credible or not credible. But if you consider that this paper is already stained and it's being used here, how would you see that result if you have already concluded that the paper is
actually
corrupted?
I read the criticism differently.
Okay.
And the way I read it is that people are beginning to believe that this thing can actually work. And those who are afraid in one way or the other that if we go into the election with it, it might scuttle some calculations they are making, are raising issues from both sides of the divide. So to me, before, people will simply say, don't worry about card readers, don't worry about, we know they are going to, that they will have moved from retail rigging to wholesale rigging to allocation. But people are now debating down to the cards, to how it is read, or where the machines you're going to use, which means a growing confidence in the process. And I will say, actually, let's take a breath and give ourselves a little pat on the back. And now that we're at the critical stage, support every stakeholder in the process to see through the process.
Okay. The issue of
Mr.
corruption.
Aremu is still online.
Yes. Okay. Let me put this question to Mr. Aremu. Mr. Aremu?
Yes, I'm with you.
I hope you can hear us.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Now, the two main presidential candidates have given their word that they're going to fight corruption, and it's quite high up on their priorities. What is your opinion of this? I mean, we've been mouthing the fight against corruption forever, but do you see them now actually taking the bull by the horns and carrying out this fight?
For me, the promise by the candidates on the surface of it is something that we should feel excited about. But my concern is that is the depth of the discussion around corruption and the tendency to also trivialize the issues. Because what we've also seen in the campaign so far is that while they speak in one breath about fighting corruption, you also find them, rather than deal with the issues, do thorough analysis. Because some of the questions I've asked myself, listening to them, is that have these people or their party actually done any thorough analysis of what actually gives rise to the state of corruption in the country? Who are involved? At what level? And what are the perceptions of people? And what systems do you also put in place to actually deal with the issue of corruption? Unfortunately, I have not seen that in what they are doing. Let me just go back quickly to what Chukwuma said earlier on. My inclination is to take it away from the election. But, I mean, what he said about the involvement of the businesses in the electoral processes, what they've done, and some of our findings have actually shown that, look, there is the largest proportion of corrupt practices in the public sector in Nigeria actually are with the active involvement of the private sector. Because the private sector is actually also responsible for carrying out capital projects in this country.